Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are in the world joining us. Welcome to the first Indonesia at Melbourne online forum, co-hosted by the Centre for Indonesian Law, Islam and Society here at Melbourne Law School. I am Tim Lindsay, Director of SILIS. It's very exciting to see our blog, Indonesia at Melbourne, go from written to spoken word and to meet our authors and readers. We are very grateful to our panelists and our audience for supporting us, but my deepest thanks go to our always energetic Indonesia at Melbourne editor, Dr. Ari Hermawan, for making today possible. Terima kasih, Ari. Let me now recognise that the University of Melbourne acknowledges the traditional owners of the unceded land on which we work, learn and live, the Wurundjeri, Woi Wurrung and Bunurong peoples. We recognise the unique place held by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the original owners and custodians of the lands and waterways across the Australian continent. We pay respects to elders, past, present and future, and acknowledge the importance of Indigenous knowledge in the Academy. So, Indonesia is once again facing a critical moment politically, economically and socially. In his second year in office, President Prabowo Subianto continues to consolidate his power by broadening his huge ruling coalition and tightening elite control over key economic sectors, all while shoring up public support through populist initiatives, including, of course, the controversial and expensive free nutritious meal program MBG. However, the former New Order General still faces major domestic and global challenges. With the global energy crisis triggered by military escalation in the Middle East now squeezing Indonesia's economy, the president will have to navigate fiscal pressures from rising global oil prices, fracturing elites, and increasing social and economic grievances, including those lingering from last year's riots. Today, regular Indonesia at Melbourne contributors Riandy Laksono, Ahmad Syarif Syechabubakar, Ahmad Rizky M Umar, Maidina Rahmawati, and Eryanto Nugroho will discuss how the Prabowo administration responds to these challenges and how it will shape Indonesia's political and economic trajectory in the years ahead. We'll hear from them in a moment. Each of our 5 speakers will present. They'll have 15 minutes each, and then we'll have half an hour for questions. But before we begin, let me just remind everybody that the Chatham House rule applies. So please do not quote the panelists without asking their permission and offering them the chance to clarify what they have to say. Also, a reminder, this event is live and is being recorded, and parts of it may be published later. When we come to the Q&A session, you'll be encouraged to submit a question using the Q&A function, which you can see at the bottom of your screen. Your questions will be moderated and collated behind the scenes and put to the panelists if time allows. In preparing your questions, please be respectful and ask questions that are relevant to the topic and short so that more people get a chance to ask questions. With all that said, let me now move to our first speaker. Dr. Ahmad Rizky M Umar is Marie Curie Fellow at the Department of International Politics at Aberystwyth University. He completed his doctorate in political science and international studies at the University of Queensland and Master of Science in Politics with Research Methods at the University of Sheffield and Bachelor of Political Science in International Relations at Universitas Gadjah Mada. So, Pak Umar, you have 15 minutes, and I will give you a reminder at 5 minutes and then again at 1 minute. We look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Pak Tim, for your introduction. So I would like to start with a broad assessment on Indonesia's foreign policy under President Prabowo Subianto right now. So as we can see, Pak Prabowo in his foreign policy has made some major changes and major shifts from what his predecessors has done, especially from that of President Joko Widodo. So there are a couple of shifts and a couple of changes in Indonesia's foreign policy under Prabowo Subianto that has been departing. At some point, it's radically departing from Jokowi. The first is that Prabowo has started his presidency in 2024 with a bold and clear foreign policy vision. He started with his simple principle, what he called as a good neighbor foreign policy, a term that he made during his campaign, during a debate at CSIS in 2023. And also, this is something that he made as a core point of his of foreign policy. His foreign policy principle, as in line with his background as a former military general and his also background as a former defense minister in Jokowi's administration, is based on the prioritization of national interest and sovereignty. And this is significant because and how he articulated his foreign policy is that he thinks of foreign policy as a vehicle to protect the Indonesia's territorial integrity and as the one to as a vehicle to protect Indonesia's sovereignty as a country. In articulating his good neighbor foreign policy, Prabowo has also established a kind of the personal diplomacy. He has made many visits to major countries in the world. France, he just recently made a trip to France and also to the UK a couple of times, signing a strategic partnership with the UK, as well as great powers, China, Russia, and also United States, of course, under President Donald Trump. And this kind of the personal visits marks an emphasis on the personal diplomacy that Prabowo Subianto has articulated in his foreign policy. And in articulating personal diplomacy, he has been bypassing the foreign ministry. He has appointed one of his inner circle, Foreign Minister Sugiono, as a foreign minister, which is in contradiction to the practice of the former presidents who appointed foreign ministers from the diplomatic ranks. And what is crucial in his foreign policy is that he has grown some dislikes and disdays of the multilateral institutions, particularly ASEAN. And and a manifesto from his Gerindra party's foreign policy campaign back in the 2024 and also in 2014 election has also explicitly mentioned ASEAN as a historical artifact which should be erased from Indonesia's foreign policy. And in making this kind of the disdays and dislikes, he aims to go beyond ASEAN in his foreign policy. He has seen Indonesia as a great nation in which Indonesia has a foreign policy ambitions and also a foreign policy status which for him should guarantees a seat among great powers. And this is something that Prabowo has articulated in his foreign policy. Now we can see that with this clear and bold foreign policy visions, Prabowo has also embarked on new ambitions in international politics. Right after his inauguration in 2024, he decided to join BRICS. He sent Foreign Minister Sugiono to the BRICS summit in Kazan to convey a message to the BRICS chair, I think Russia at the time, to join BRICS, which was in reversal to the President Jokowi's reluctance to join BRICS back in during his presidency. And in 2025, Indonesia was duly accepted by other BRICS members as a new member of the BRICS. Indonesia also has made some growing engagement, and the most visible one was in the Middle East. Prabowo has used his visits to Jordan, as well as United Arab Emirates and several other Middle Eastern countries to step up engagement with other Middle Eastern countries, to articulate his uh, visions and his keenness to participate in the Middle East peace process. And one of the inevitable engagement is with Israel at some point, because, and this is also in reversal to the his predecessor's foreign policy, is that in the UN General Assembly session in 2025, he acknowledged the rights for Israel for national to protect national security of Israel, which is something that the former presidents, even President Suharto, has not done in international forum. And there are also some other developments after that. Indonesia has decided to join the board of peace, and also has committed peacekeeping forces for international stabilization forces in Gaza. And also, President Prabowo has also stepped up new engagement with China, Russia, and also United States through bilateral process, in which President Prabowo himself has articulated a keenness to engage and to interact with Trump, with Xi Jinping, and also with Vladimir Putin for better deals and negotiations. This is something that the former presidents before him, even President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, has not done in an extensive way, because even President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono back in from 2004 until 2014 was not extensive as President Prabowo in his foreign visits and engagement with other countries. So this is something that is remarkable. And the question is whether or not Prabowo has been able to deliver his ambitions in his foreign policy. Let's start with the positive side first. Definitely, with his foreign policy visits, with his new ambitions, and also with his personal diplomacy, Prabowo has gained access to the three great powers at the time, to Trump, to Xi, and also Jinping, and also to Vladimir Putin, which eventually brings him a seat to the table among the great powers. And also Prabowo has been able to negotiate Indonesia's key interests. For example, last week, Prabowo has been able to negotiate uh, energy deal with Vladimir Putin, while at the same time simultaneously engaging with President Trump for defense agreements. Yeah, this is remarkable because in this political context, engagement with Russia will gain irks, or it will gain any discontent within the Western countries, and some countries like the European Union, for example, has made clear that any attempts to engage with Russia will result in secondary sanctions, which the EU has done, I think, earlier this week. This is something that Prabowo has been able to navigate and have been able to manage in his foreign policy. However, certainly we need to acknowledge that this kind of vision and this kind of the foreign policy activism, which is unprecedented in foreign policy since Sukarno era, has not seen Indonesia as a growing major power itself. In the sense, Indonesia's foreign policy activism has been limited to key neighbors and partners. For example, Indonesia's Middle East engagement has not seen Indonesia gaining and has not seen Indonesia's playing role in mediating the tensions. Prabowo
5 minutes,
himself has
Umar.
okay, all right, yes. Prabowo himself has made some interest to join mediation in Iran, for example, which Prabowo wasn't able to do because of its limited capacity. And there are signs of the growing diplomatic exhaustions within the foreign ministry. With Indonesia's commitment and Indonesia's participation in BRICS, also with the Board of Peace, there are signs of the overcommitment that Indonesia has made in international politics right now, and there are some institutional disconnects between president and foreign ministry, which to some extent constrain Indonesia's engagement with the diplomatic circles. And also, if we take a look at the domestic responses, some of Prabowo's foreign policy, like the participation in Israel, also participation with the Middle Eastern peace process with the Board of Peace, is not something that Prabowo has been able to navigate. There are signs of protests from Indonesia's Islamic organizations about Indonesia's participation with the Board of Peace, which made Indonesia struggling to deliver the foreign policy ambitions to the domestic context. And I think this is something that is Prabowo has yet to resolve. Prabowo has attempted to bring together all Islamic organizations in the presidential palace, for example, and did some briefings. But some organization like Muhammadiyah or the Islamic Ulama Council uh, was not seen as uncritical. They are still seen Indonesia's participation as betraying the foreign policy promises that Prabowo and the constitutional mandate has outlined. So I think at this stage, Prabowo's ambitions might not be necessarily delivering his ambitions either to improve Indonesia's status in international politics or either to the domestic politics. And we're yet to see that Prabowo will be able to do this in the next couple of years. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Umar, for that really interesting oversight of foreign policy under President Prabowo Subianto. Our next speaker is going to look at the economy. Dr. Riandy Laksono is a postdoctoral researcher at Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam and a researcher in the Department of Economics of the Centre for Strategic and International Studies, better known as CSIS, of course, in Indonesia. Riandy completed his PhD from the Arndt Corden Department of Economics and the Crawford School of Public Policy at ANU. Riandy, you have 15 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here in the Indonesia at Melbourne first webinar about Indonesia, obviously. Last week, we just presented this version of the paper in the ANU seminar. So it is my pleasure to represent it again, at least some version of it, and extend some material to cover also the Iran crisis. So today, I would like to argue to review and argue what we write in the paper, what we term as Prabowonomics. So I think Indonesia at Melbourne is one of the first media outlet to terms Prabowo economic policy as Prabowonomics at the time last year. I think I was in the podcast, but now we term it Prabowonomics. So apologize for that in advance. So we decided to change the term slightly a bit. I think it's better rhyme with his actual name. So yeah, from now we would like to call it with Prabowonomics. So I will tell you how the Prabowonomics is now really under pressure. And let me start with how the Prabowonomics is defined. So a lot of economic policy has been characterizing Prabowo's presidency. But I would like to give you I would like to deliver this the growth policy that are the cornerstone of economic policy under Prabowo administration. So has been all about economic growth. The 8% economic growth has been the cornerstone, and the foundation of that economic growth of 8% has been in the three things. First is it's a heavily demand-led growth policy, meaning you put more money into government's pocket so that the governments can demand more, can buy more, or investor can buy more, consumer can buy more. Basically, you put more money in the pocket. So that's the theory of change behind Prabowo economic or growth policy. So that has been devised through flagship program such as MBG, obviously, a free lunch program, Red and White Cooperative, and other flagship program. The theory of change behind the growth policy of Prabowo is that Prabowo wants to see economic growth happening based on agriculture sector and happening for the rural economy. That's why he do it through MBG and he do it through KDKMP or Red and White Cooperative. And obviously that needs to be supported by ambitious fiscal expansion, not because we have more money, but because the fiscal policy is now more and more built upon unrealistic tax revenue target. So it is based on unrealistic revenue target, and when they cannot achieve it, they reallocate the budget to focus on the more flagship program. So that's the way they do it. That's the first. The second is basically state-led economy. So you have Danantara, you have more and more SOE assignment, you have state-led mobilization. For example, the Red and White Cooperative, the money is coming from state-owned banks and it's delivered through Agrinas, right? And then military and police getting more involved in the civic delivery of flagship programs. So state is basically more expanded. And the last part is unconventional macro policy. Why we term it unconventional? Because previously, at least under Jokowi and SBY, at least within Sri Mulyani as a finance minister, it always been stability first framework. So the fiscal discipline, you cannot go beyond the targeted inflation or targeted deficit rules. But now it's slowly changed into growth first. Whatever happened, growth come first rather than stability. We can then talk about how to relax the fiscal deficit and all that stuff. And that comes the quasi-monetary injection. Remember last year, Purbaya tried to inject money into state-owned banks and in the hope that state-owned banks can deliver more credit, but eventually the demand is not there. So it's not being picked up by the private sector. And then even though the inflation pressure is going up, the Bank of Indonesia still maintain the rate. So that's very unconventional. Usually, when the inflation pressure goes up, the BI usually anticipate with increasing the interest rate to maintain the inflation, but sacrificing the growth. So the strategy is relying more on pushing the demand, and expanding the state, but lacking this one major problem that has been hampering Indonesian economy for quite some time, which is the productivity and supply side problem. And I would like to say that the Prabowo is still stuck in the old growth theory called Harut Domar model, meaning if you want to grow at some percent, you need more money. So there are new growth theory that apparently he doesn't subscribe to. So this is just the example. Prabowo wants to inject money at that time around September on your right hand side, but it didn't happen quite fast. But the improvement happening coinciding with the moment where a government decide to assign Agrinas to deliver the state-owned banks loan to the red and white cooperative. So we are not sure whether the uptick in the investment is truly capital injection from private sector, or is it basically driven by Agrinas. And on your left hand side, on the gray dark gray line, it shows you that more and more recently the government debt is being held by BI. So this is the example of unconventional monetary policy, conventional macro policy, where a Bank of Indonesia is supporting more and more the fiscal stance of the government. Yep. And we know the fiscal position of Indonesia is under strain in 2025. The deficit is very close to 3%, and that's because the income tax collection has dropped by 13%. So it's negative 13%. It's worse than global financial crisis, and the only better it's only better compared to COVID time. So it's historically the worst income tax collection performance of all time, and the APBN 2026 or fiscal policy in 2026 assume the deficit to GDP ratio to be around 2.7%, but that's only because it relies on unrealistic tax ratio that needs to go from 9.3 in 2025 to 10.5. So never in the history of Indonesia tax ratio increasing by that much, especially without any commodity boom episode. So that's how unrealistic the government budget in 2026. And bear in mind that's before Iran crisis, right? That's before Iran crisis. So can you imagine how under pressure it is now with the Middle East crisis? And why we are the fiscal position is under crisis, under pressure, is because the oil prices is increasing so much. Year-to-date growth is already close to 70% increase from the start of the year, and the assumption of oil prices is 70 US dollar per barrel. Meanwhile, right now is around 100, and even at one point it close to 140. So one estimation is if government doesn't raise the subsidy, the deficit could blow up additional 1 percentage point. So that goes beyond the 3%. And I think what I read from Prabowo's policy is Prabowo is betting that the Iran war is short-lived because he doesn't want to increase the subsidy, the subsidized fuel price. He only raised the price for Pertamax Turbo. That's non-subsidy. That's no-brainer. It must be increased. But he's betting on a short-lived war in Iran, and that is not likely going to happen on his favor because we know the ceasefire is highly unstable, and even without Iran war, we know that our fiscal policy is under strain. Without huge tax jump or tax revenue jump, you cannot stay within the 3%, and that's before Iran crisis. And why is that? Only up to March you can it's quite small, but on the bottom of it, the government deficit to GDP ratio only up to March is already close to 1%. Only for 3 months, already close to 1%. That's very unprecedented because in last year and until up to 22, usually in the first 3 months is still surplus, and in the March 2025 it's only 0.41% deficit. Now it blew up close to 1%, and it's because our government spending, you can see here, government spending, the realization of government spending is already 21% compared to last year is only 17%, and the previous years also quite low. And that's driven mainly by MBG realization, which is never happening before. And it's very easy to disburse money through MBG these days. And why our fiscal policy cannot sustain for so long is because one of the strategy of Indonesia is we are also hoping that there is a windfall to our main exported commodity. But the coal prices, the crude palm oil prices, nickel and copper prices doesn't increase as much, and we don't have windfall tax, and it's not state-owned companies. So whenever price increase doesn't translate directly to the fiscal position of Indonesia. And government now considering windfall tax, but the complication with windfall tax is that if you put windfall tax during this difficult time, it will add more cost to businesses. So you have this so-called revenue or growth dilemma, which one you want to prioritize first, especially when Prabowo is ambitious enough to still achieve 5 to 6% growth this year. Certainly, Prabowo also doesn't want this to happen, sacrificing the business sector. So it's been very hard for Prabowo. So what is the possible short-term action, right? The easiest solution is for some analysts, obviously.
Five minutes.
Yes, I'm going very close to the end. So one of the obvious solution is to cut down MBG, right? That's very obvious because MBG take up so much space. It's take up like 10% of our total budget of Indonesia, half of central education budget, and 1/3 of total education budget in 2026. But it's not so easy because the kitchen has been established. SPPG, they call it, is already 27,000 SPPG out of the target of 30,000 SPPG. So around 90% kitchen has been built all around Indonesia. very close to completion. And 75 targeted recipient already has been reached. So imagine how much workers and capital will be made redundant if the MBG is scaled back radically. So one of the choice is not scaling back fully or stopping on only targeting to the most undernourished one or the most poor category, but to reduce the MBG days. So for example, instead of 6 days, probably 4 days or 3 days. That's more palatable compared to like rolling back altogether for some region that don't need them. We know that's not good enough, but comparing the dilemma facing Prabowo's administration also not so easy. So they already been deep in the water, as you may call it. So they cannot easily go out of that situation. And our MBG program, the school meal program, is one of the biggest in the world. 1.4% GDP. Meanwhile, in India, it's 0.06%, and Bhutan 0.13%. We know India has been doing it for quite some time. And yeah, so considering all that, and considering all the pressure that Indonesia is facing, will we see a more realistic or more fine-tuned Prabowonomics? I'm quite pessimistic of that. So I will perceive that Prabowonomic is still pretty much ongoing because the budget is already been disbursed, the structure is already there, the red and white cooperative, if you go to Morowali, even in the isolated area of Morowali, they already have that. So there's no way they could roll it back. So they need to even go beyond, they need to go all in right now. So I think the first that we would like, that we are going to see is Prabowo still go with the growth first strategy rather than stability first, and still going to rely on the populist agenda and stability first framework that has been the cornerstone of Indonesia's macro policy will gradually lose its grip. And one of the reason why Prabowo is quite adamant of this free lunch program and KDKMP is that it is better to disburse the money as a free lunch program rather than it being leaking to the elites. So the leakage theory has been has been lingering Prabowo's mind for quite some time, and he truly believes that, and it will not going over so soon. And also one of the key element is that he truly believed that the agriculture and food sector will be remain key growth sector in Indonesia rather than manufacturing and urban sectors. So based on that, I'm skeptical about Prabowonomics getting more realistic. What I predict is there will be more and more discussion to relax the fiscal deficit rule. So that's the more I think realistic way. If I'm under Prabowo's administration, that's the way that they are going to pursue in the future, because no way they will roll back their priority program. So that's from me. Let's discuss more. Thank you.
Many thanks, Riandy, for that really comprehensive account of what's going on with Prabowonomics. Next speaker is Maidina Rahmawati. She currently serves as the Deputy Director of the Institute for Criminal Justice. She holds a Master of Laws from University of New South Wales with specialisations in criminal justice and human rights. Her research has been on police accountability in criminal justice systems in Indonesia. She is also a certified advocate and litigator and mediator. She has 7 years of experience advocating criminal justice reform in Indonesia and has written widely on its criminal justice system, sexual violence law, and drug policy reform. So may you have 15 minutes. We look forward to hearing what you have to say about the rule of law and criminal justice.
Yeah, thank you, Fatim, for this introduction. Thank you for having me for the Indonesia at Melbourne blogspot. So I want to present my reflection as a researcher and a defender about what Prabowo has missed in fixing rule of law and criminal justice reform last year in 2025 and the outlook for this year. I want to talk about what Prabowo has done, and more importantly, about what he has failed to do on rule of law and criminal justice reform. My argument is simple that last year was actually a critical window and it was closed. We are left right now this year with the criminal justice system and the law that has become even more useful for those in power and even more danger for ordinary people, for activists like me and those who are being so critical to government. So I want to start my presentation with the situation of Indonesia in terms of the rule of law, because the number tells a story that hard to dismiss. Indonesia rule of law index has remained relatively stagnant over the past decade of years. Indonesia right now in last year ranks 69 position out of 143 countries last year, and it's a decrease from the previous years, and it's below the global and East Asia and Pacific regional average. And it's not a country, Indonesia is not a country in a transition of moving upward. We have been declining or stagnating for the 5 consecutive years. But the overall ranking understates the severity of the 2 specific aspects that I want to highlight on criminal justice and also on the problem of the corruption. On criminal justice, the one of the weakness sub indicators is only below 1.4 the scores, and it reflects the system. There is no any meaningful judicial scrutiny in how the case is built. So right now, actually, the implementation of the criminal law in Indonesia highly driven by the police or the prosecutors. The pre-trial hearing that actually is for the examination of the admissibility of the case is actually the procedural only mechanism or examination. There's no any substantial role of the judicial scrutiny. Courts are not just adjudicating based on the substance of the case, but they are actually only ratifying what the police and the prosecutors have already decided in terms of collecting the evidence in the preliminary investigation, and also the prosecutors. And the second problem is about the absence of the corruption, the problem on the corruption. As we know, since the previous administration of Jokowi, the KPK has been structurally weakened and subject to presidential oversight that influence its independence. And I want to highlight as well that recent case has been present the lack of accountability on the enforcement of the corruption law presented by the Attorney General Office, that the criminalization is used not on the accountability mechanism, but more on the instrument of the political persecution. And these 2 dimensions on criminal justice and corruption are not separate problems. They are 2 phases that present the structural failure in Indonesia system. That when it comes to the rule of law, our legal system is not partial, prone to be used against the citizen and against the citizen, and also against the one that being critical, like activists or human rights defender. But at the same time, it's too weak to hold the power accountable. And this is the baseline from which Prabowo inherent the presidency. And last year in 2025, when the discussion of the reform of the criminal procedure code was being deliberated last year, but Prabowo had a chance to fix this problem, but he did not succeed to make any substantial reform in the criminal justice system. So Indonesia highlight the most problematic, highlight the situation about the Indonesian of criminal justice. That actually this system is structurally broken. Indonesia criminal justice process is, like I mentioned earlier, police and prosecutor driven, with courts functioning largely as a rubber stamp rather than the independent arbiters. The root cause of this problem is actually from the new order. It used what the scholar called the previous criminal code used the principle, but not really a principle in criminal law. That use the functional differentiation, that the criminal process separate into 3 stages of the process, where each of the stage run by each institution by its own lane without the judicial scrutiny, without the oversight mechanism, check and balances among the stages, among the processes. The only check mechanism is unclear procedural law about the pre-trial or pra-peradilan, and it's not substantial in terms of the examination of the process, and the consequences is in the substance, in the merits of the criminal prosecution in Indonesia, like it lack of meaningful oversight, human rights violation occur, coercive confession, fabricated evidence, prolonged detention are documented but almost never persecuted, almost never responded by the judicial court, by the judicial authority, how to respond or how to sanction the verdict in the process. And what I want to highlight as well in terms of the mechanism of the criminal justice system, since 2021, Indonesia introduced restorative justice. So in our criminal policy, in our legal law reform, there has been huge use of the idea or the narrative, the jargon of restorative justice as a policy priority in criminal justice system. But the definition of restorative justice in the law and also adopted in the new criminal procedure code being misread as the out-of-court settlement. So restorative justice defined by Indonesia as an out-of-court settlement with so minimal accountability mechanism. And now it's being adopted in the new criminal procedure code, and also it will be applied to corporation without any judicial scrutiny. It can be applied in the preliminary investigation with the power only for from the police to conduct the mechanism of restorative justice, and with a very limited minimal judicial scrutiny. And the result is a system that structure in inequality and also lack of accountability. So the police have their own mechanism, and also the prosecutors. I will mention later about the role of the prosecutor right now. And it is really minimal response in the accountability in the judicial scrutiny system. So basically, last year, we, civil society organization working a lot on the advocacy of the criminal justice reform. What we want, what the civil society organization network call for the criminal justice reform is actually substantial on the two aspects, only the two aspects. About the first one, about the objective criteria for carrying out the law enforcement authorities, at the very least about the coercive measure. We want to have the clear criteria and also the oversight mechanism of each law enforcement authority. Then the oversight mechanism by strengthening the law, the role of the judicial authority. And the second one, we want to have the role of the lawyer, the role of the defenders that is more substantial, explicitly regulated in the new law on the defense, and it regulates the rights of the people, especially the suspect, defendant, witness, and victim. That is substantial and operational, not only the wordings or not only the normative explanation in the law. We want that kind of things, two things in the criminal procedure code. And we know, we knew that there are not actually radical demands. There are minimum standards that required by commitment of Indonesia about the fair trial. But when it's come to the law that was adopted last year as the new criminal procedure code, what we actually got is in one sentence. In the new criminal procedure code, we are all risk of being trapped in a criminal case, forced through a process that monopolized by the law enforcers, especially police and prosecutors, and we don't have any access to judicial oversight and no substantial guarantee access to legal aid. Like I highlight here about the authority of the police to conduct the undercover operation, about the entrapment is legalized under the authority on the preliminary investigation with no any judicial scrutiny at all. There's no any warrant to do that from the police. And also related to the the core problem on coercive action, like Indonesia, an arrest and detention, the police officer and the prosecutors can do the arrest and detention without any judicial warrant. So they can define it the needs or the assessment for conducting arrest and detention. We demanded for the new law that include the warrant, judicial warrant, but our recommendation was not accepted by the government and the parliament, and
May, it's
they even,
5 minutes.
they
Lima.
even yeah they even give the more broad grounds for the coercive measure. And the problem of this also proven in the criminalization. Like we have the problem on the mass criminalization, mass arrest and detention back in during the protest 2000 and last year, and also not to forget about the police reform agenda. Even after the case of the Afan Kurniawan's death, the Prabowo mentioned about the police agenda, the police reform will be the agenda. But until right now, there's no any follow up about this police reform agenda. So this is my last presentation about what bring us to this year. I'm not actually optimistic. We are witnessing not only the reform failure, but it's also the redistribution of the power among the security actors. The military has been repositioned as to manage the high-cost government program, the flagship program like MBG and also food estate, but it is also the logic of the military law revision. And meanwhile, in the criminal procedure code, in the criminal process, the police consolidate their grip over ordinary criminal case to the new law of the criminal procedure code. And right now, we're also witnessing the new power from the Attorney General office that is seeking to reassert itself through their power in the problematic prosecution. Like we have been see about the implementation prosecution of the Tom Lembong, Ira Puspita Dewi, and Asta Cita that based on the unclear grounds for the criminalization. And it is because the distribution about the police focus more on the ordinary crimes, and then the Attorney General office will focus on the extraordinary crime, corruption, and both of them will do the lack of accountability of the system. And coming up next, will be also the legislation asset forfeiture bill, which will also expand the power from the Attorney General office for collecting money from the law enforcement officer. And also there will be bill on the judgeship in the parliament that will raise the subordinate, so the risk of the conflict of interest between the Supreme Court and also the government. So this bill, each piece of legislation is designed to serve the political consolidation, and the power right now, actually, the reform right now actually does not check on the power, and I think that is not the real reform that we want to get from the civil society organization side. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ibu May, for that thorough but very depressing presentation. I am now going to hand over chairing of the next two sessions to the SILIS Deputy Director, Associate Professor Nadir Shah Hossain. Pak Nadir, silakan.
Thank you, Pak Tim. It's a real pleasure to chair the next two sessions. So we still have two brilliant speakers with us today that are going to enlighten us today. And then as we can read from their writings in Indonesia at Melbourne blog, their works have consistently pushed boundaries and opened new ways of thinking. So the first one is Ahmad Syarif Syechabubakar. He's a PhD candidate at the School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins. I know it's really an early morning in US right now, Pak Syarif, or I think traditional Muslim communities will call him Habib Syarif. So I'm going to invite you all to warmly welcoming Pak Syarif.
Thank you very much, Gus Nadir. It's very appreciated, and it's been excited to be here. I mean, the first time I had invitation from Mas Ari, I immediately say yes. And I want to say to the thank you to Indonesia and Melbourne. Been hosting my article since 2016. I mean, like there is a lot of good articles, and you are kind of helping a new scholars to coming in into the to share their idea and thoughts. I'm going to a little bit efficient on this. So my presentations for our discussions today is a much more to try to discuss how the advisors or how our presidents or Indonesian presidents being advised by its advisor. What kind of conditions that may allow the president to get informations and insight for decision-making process. I want to start uh, with the actually what is the presidential psychology in this matter. There is a This situation is not only about President Prabowo per se. Any president has these common traits of they're feeling insecure. They kind of see it, the rivals or individual try to undermine their power or dismantle their power. They also see a constant competitions, especially in electoral Indonesia, about potential other candidates. As we heard, like under the first President Jokowi first terms, he kind of there is a rumor that he removed Anies Baswedan because he thinks Anies tried to steal electoral benefits as becoming a minister of education. That's come from a multiple situations that also we can see under each presidency, either SBY and the current president, Bapak Prabowo. They also have a narrow perspective on how to see policies or making decisions. That's mostly because they have a very limited times. They also do not have enough time to govern. That's normal and common within the presidential situations. So that is why actually many president relies heavily on advisors to kind of help them getting informations, getting insights, and also provide a policy making process. But I want to go to the next slide. But actually, in the common sense, who is advising Indonesian presidents and how they get informations? So I kind of try to map a three layers in this. First, as we need to see that there is a group of advisor institutionally that within the president inner circles. We can say is a SETCAP, a state cabinet, state secretary, presidential office staff that we often call as KSP, or other presidential aide or ajudan that we often call in Indonesia. So these groups of people is by daily basis, every morning briefing the president, sharing information, making selections of type of information or insight that the president need to know or the president doesn't need to know. It's as simple as if there is 1,000 letters come to the palace each morning, this advisor will choose which letters that the president need to read. If there is a invitations for meetings, this advisor is also the one that selecting who will meet the presidents. So that's the inner circle, the daily operations of the presidents. The second is a much more key figures within the governments. It's like a powerful ministers and someone who can move the needle for the presidents. But rather than within the president inner circle, this official is often having their own ministerial to be running. I put a picture of Pak Safri Samsudin here, Indonesian Minister of Defense, along friend, acquaintance of President Prabowo. He helped the president managing the security aspect and sometimes politics that may be outside of his own purview, if we can say. For example, he managing uh, the agriculture projects within the Minister of Defense, which he oversee, and of course the famous Pak Luhut. Pak Luhut is managing everything for Pak Jokowi, from the negotiations of a high-speed rail with China into managing COVID-19 and several other projects that he managed. In Indonesia, where institution is not yet strong, but also not weak, a figure like this is highly relevant to kind of helping the presidential to be much more effective. And the last is external advisor, which is sometimes former ministers or academics or business leader or others. These figures is they giving the advice to the president, but they have a very limited influence into the decision process. They're becoming an external consultant. As we can see, there is a Pak Hatib Basri, and also the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Bapak Martina Talagawa. These individuals is often sharing their perspective for the president in decision-making process. So this is kind of the three key points in Indonesia decision-making process on the president's side. But let's go a little bit deep dive into who is advising President Prabowo actually. So we kind of make a three differentiations of who advising the president. The first is absolutely what we call it a personal under a personal aid and junior inner circles. People often call it the Hambalang boys, but I will not use that terms. I try to use a much more technical terms to kind of analyze this character of these figures. So these figures are the people will be let's call Teddy Indra Wijaya, the state cabinets. There is also a chief of personal assistant, Bapak Rizky, and also Bapak Agung Suherman, who is also part of the personal assistant of the president. The character of these groups is they have a very limited external political networks. Their political patron is only the president. They don't have other networks. So that's why they're becoming very limited in terms of access. The second is a mid-career politicians. You can see Pak Sugiono, Pak Prasetyo Hadi, and Sudaryono, and several other teams actually. This is a mid-career politicians. Despite they're very close to President Prabowo, they see their political career is much more wider, even after this presidency. Their political network is still underdeveloped, but they develop it quite strong. The difference between this mid-career inner circle and junior inner circle is the mid-career inner circle, they have their own post. For example, Sudaryono is a Vice Minister of Agriculture, Sugiono is Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Prasetyo Hadi is Secretary Cabinet. But since let's call Teddy focusing so much on internal the presidents, so he kind of managing dual roles. So he also managing the state secretary and cabinet secretary day-to-day activities, especially in coordinations with the wider senior advisor, which is the third groups. So senior advisor, as we can see, Pak Safri, Susmi Dasko Asmat, Zulhas, and probably Pak Bahlil as well. These people has so high political capitals. Their bargaining leverage to the president is really strong. They also have a wide political network. Most of them are the chairman of political party. And for most, they also operate relatively autonomous from the president-own inner circle. So they can do they can do their own interests, but at the same time managing the president interest quite well. So the next slide will be, so this is what I just tried to be. First of all, this is still hypotheticals. Of course, there is a much more research needed to be discussed. But what I want to highlight in this situation is Indonesia, is actually developing its own presidential institutionalisms, which, as we mentioned earlier, SETCAP, SETNEC, KSP, and also the chief of staff. So these figures is kind of managing, coordinating president schedules. They do an issues and information selection. What is important, what is not, what is the president need to focus on. And they're also tracking and keep the president on track on key issues and projects. I want to take examples, the August protest last year. 5 minutes, Pak Nadir. I will still be patient. And someone need to knock the president rooms at the midnight saying, Pak, there is a chaos in Jakarta right now. You need to be, this is attention that important to you. But if you are too junior, you either too afraid to knock the president room, or you don't know how vital is that matter is, because you don't have that kind of a political horizons to understand the issues that whether it's important or the level of the importance of the issue for the presidents. So I wanna and they also have a coordinating role, definitely, which is kind of important on this matter. The next slide will be, as actually we already discussed briefly in the previous slide, that there is imbalance of power. For example, the role of Pak Safri Samsudin, the role of Pak Zulkifli Hasan, Pak Bahlil, and also several other senior figures is so high. So they can operate relatively independent in compared to other advisors, either medium or junior advisors. But the main risk, as we mentioned earlier, is the president is relatively surrounded by junior advisor who is not training to be a policy advisors. Is so different from previous Pak Pratikno or Pak Pramono Anung under President Jokowi presidency. Pak Pratikno or Pak Pramono Anung knows what matters. They know how to deal with other technocrats. They know how to manage dissents or disagreements among ministers rather than put a blind eyes on it. So that's the current issue that we see right now. Meanwhile, the mid-career advisor like Sugiono, Prasetyo Hadi, and Sudaryono, they have their own play card. They have their own political career they want to develop. That's actually intentionally limited the access to the president daily activity, while at the same time they're managing relationship with senior politicians or also developing their own a political network in that matters. So this is actually my last slide. So how do we understand President Prabowo presidency? I mean, to be honest, we definitely seeing a different type of presidency compared to Jokowi or SBY, where we see team of rivals. We see figures is kind of having disagreements and sometimes openly, but it's kind of managed from the president via a key advisor like Pramono Anung or Pratikno. We don't see it right now. But at the same time, this is not a static group of yes men. This is not merely a group of people who only say yes to the president. There is some frictions, and that friction is not yet reached the surface. We can see in the multiple situations, the August protest is one of it, and several other cases that we can discuss later on. But this is what I try to propose for us into try to understanding President Prabowo presidency, especially his relationship with the advisor. I mean, rather than we keep asking the President Prabowo personality or the way he managed things and everything, I think the best kind of answer is what kind of information environments that the president and his coalition's advisor produce. How did they get information? How do they filter information? Who hold the information and deliver it to the presidents? And for most, what are the policy consequences from that environment? I think I stop there, Mas Nadir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bib. It is a great presentation. I think there are rumors and gossips around Prabowo's inner circle that being discussed in social media. But then the way that your presentation here, I think is great because you put it into the academic perspective. So hopefully there'll be some kind of more insight informations during the Q&A later on. So I'm really proud to introduce our final speaker, our own Eryanto Nugroho. Pak Eri is a PhD candidate here at Melbourne Law School, and he's also the chair of Indonesian Foundation for Law and Policy Studies, ISHK, and he's also a member of the advisory board of Hukum Online, Indonesia's leading legal information website. So please join me in warmly welcoming Pak Eri.
Thank you, Pak Nadir, for the introduction, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's already benefited from listening to the insightful presentation from the speakers before me. In my remarks, I would like to offer a few reflections on what may lie ahead for Indonesia under Prabowo, focusing in particular on the question of law reform and how it is evolving in the current political context. So let me start with the law reform under Prabowo. As noted in the seminar invitation, a useful entry point is the Prabowo Gibran campaign platform, the Asta Cita, the 8 missions. The point 7 of the Asta Cita promise to strengthen political, legal, and bureaucratic reform, and to enhance the prevention and eradication of corruption and narcotics. So on paper, that sounds entirely consistent with the aspiration of reformasi. Now you also can see that I deliberately included the image of Gibran, so Prabowo with Gibran, as we can see in this event, the topics is about Prabowo, and then in the invitation, the discussion is about Prabowo. I just want to make sure that we don't forget Gibran, not only to remind that we have him as a vice president, but also a reminder that if we want to understand what may lie ahead under Prabowo, we cannot ignore Gibran and the political forces behind him, and that they are part of the equation. Just a quick illustration and perhaps a gentle warning for those interested in the discussion, for example, about the impeachment recently discussed by Professor Saiful Mujani, the discussion about impeachment under Article 7A of the 1945 Indonesian Constitution. Do not forget that Article 8, if the Prabowo is removed, Gibran will takes over. So any analysis of political risks or transition needs to keep that very much in mind. Coming back to law reform, the key point is this. We cannot assess the Asta Cita promise in isolation. We need to read it against the actual political and legal direction Indonesia has taken since Prabowo assumed office. And here it's become more complicated. In practice, the narrative and the legal political trajectory under Prabowo appears to be drifting away from the spirit of Reformasi 1998, and in some respect, echoing patterns associated with the new order. We can already see some clear signals. There has been a visible rehabilitation of Suharto, now a hero, national hero. At the same time, aspects of past human rights abuse are being downplayed or even denied. For instance, the statement from Minister Fadli Zon rejecting the occurrence of the May 1998 mass rapes. None of this is entirely surprising given Prabowo's own historical trajectory during the New Order period. Another important issue in the context of law reform is the ongoing discussion around constitutional amendments. It is worth recalling that Prabowo and his Gerindra party have repeatedly expressed support for returning to the original 1945 constitution, a constitutional framework that enabled authoritarian rule in Indonesia for more than 3 decades. That is something we need to watch very carefully. So if we put all of this together, what can we say? In my view, law reform under Prabowo is struggling to move forward in any meaningful sense. Yes, legal changes continue on paper. We have new laws, amendment, institutional adjustment, but the broader reform project has to a large extent lost its underlying spirit. It becomes slower, weaker, and increasingly disconnected from the democratic goals that once defined it. And this is precisely why a number of scholars have begun to question the very continuity of reformasi itself. For example, Jackie Becker has argued that Indonesia's reformasi movement, as we once understood, it is effectively dead. That, I think, is the context in which we need to understand law reform in Indonesia today. Let me now turn more directly to what law reform looks like in practice under Prabowo Subianto. Broadly speaking, what we are seeing is a continuation and in some way an intensification of the approach we saw in the Jokowi era, where a law being used as a tool to maintain, expand, and potentially extend political power. If we look how laws are being made, one clear pattern is the pace about lawmaking is now often fast-tracked with very limited meaningful public participation. The TNI bill is a good example for this. At the same time, we are seeing also a significant expansion of the security sector power. The military is being given a larger role in civilian governance, while the police are gaining stronger powers under the revised KUHAP, the new KUHAP. So both arms of the security apparatus are being strengthened through legal means. Alongside this, there is a more gradual but very important trend, the weakening of key reformasi era institution. For example, the KPK and the MK, the Mahkamah Konstitusi. Another feature worth highlighting is the growing weaponization of law. Law is increasingly used to discipline dissent and manage criticism. We also see law functioning as a shield of impunity, particularly in cases involving the security sector. Just recent case is the handling of the acid attack on activist Andri Yunus is a telling example. At the elite level, law enforcement appears increasingly selective. It is used not only to punish, but also to manage a political relationship. The granting of amnesty to Hasto Kristianto from PDIP is often cited as an example of how legal tools can be used within the elite bargaining. We also see a clearer sign of digital authoritarianism, regulatory measures such as those affecting the Magdalene, the under ComDG regulation. It suggests a growing willingness to control the digital space through legal frameworks. So law is functioning less a mechanism for democratic transformation and more as an instrument of political control. What's next? Let me close by looking ahead. What might come next under Prabowo? If current trend continue, I think it is quite clear that Prabowo will place a strong emphasis on political stability. And to achieve that, he is likely to keep consolidating support among political and institutional elites. Stability, in the sense, is not just about governance, it is also about maintaining a broad and manageable coalition of power. In that context, law will play a central role to manage, contain, and discipline dissent. There are already early signals pointing in this direction. We need to pay close attention to emerging initiatives such as the proposed bill on countering disinformation and foreign propaganda, RUU disinformasi dan propaganda asing, and RPP tugas TNI, the government regulation on TNI duties. So the key point going forward is this, that the future of law reform in Indonesia will not be defined by whether new laws are passed, but by how those laws are used and for what purposes. My last slides is about signs of civil society resistance and resilience. Indonesian civil society today still carries the long shadow of New Order. We see the effect quite clearly, the depoliticization, demobilization, and fragmentation. Those legacies have not disappeared. They continue to shape how civil society operates. And yet, despite this constraint, we do still see important signs of resilience. Civil society has not gone silent. It continues to respond, to adapt, and to push back, often under quite difficult conditions. That said, we should be realistic about the nature of this resilience. At the moment, it is still fragile, defensive, and largely focused on survival rather than being fully transformative. It is about holding ground rather than fundamentally reshaping the system. Going forward, one key challenge is the need for stronger alliance and more coordinated long-term strategies. Without that, efforts will remain fragmented and their impact limited. So my last point is about TAUD, the Tim Advokasi untuk Demokrasi, that play a very significant role in providing legal defense, the legal resistance. It's actively involved in pushing for accountability also in the acid attack against activist Andri Yunus. This kind of effort demonstrate that legal resistance is still very much alive in Indonesia. But stepping back, the broader picture remains the same. Civil society resistance persists, but it is still constrained and fragmented. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Eri. I'm sure that you will get many questions because this is really an important issue and very sensitive one. So I think we already hear all the speakers. Then it's time for me now to hand over to Ibu Dr. Helen Pauseker.
Thank you very much, Nadia, and thank you for chairing that session. It's my pleasure now to introduce Dr. Ari Hermawan, who's going to be fielding the questions for the Q&A. He will explain, you put them in the Q&A, but if you'd like to start thinking about them now, that'd be good. Dr. Ari Hermawan is currently the editor of the Indonesia at Melbourne blog, which is hosting this session along with the Centre for Indonesian Law Islam Society. And we should add that this whole seminar was Pak Ari's own idea, and he's been the main driving force behind it. So thank you very much, Ari. And I'd also personally like to say how much we love having you here and what
Thank
you've
you,
been
Helen.
contributing to us. So, but Ari is also an associate director of the Centre for Indonesian Law, Islam and Society, known as SILIS, and a visiting fellow at the Regional Social and Cultural Studies at the ISEAS Yusuf Ishak Institute in Singapore. Ari's a researcher and a columnist with over 20 years of experience writing about Indonesian politics and society. He has a PhD in Asian Studies from the University of Melbourne's Asia Institute, a Master of Arts in Journalism from the University of Arizona, and Bachelor of Arts in Islamic History from Sharif Hidayatullah State Islamic University. Ari's worked as managing editor and editor-at-large for Indonesia's leading English daily, the Jakarta Post, and is also co-founder of public journalism initiative Project Multatuli, and a former director of Amnesty International Indonesia. Ari's research interests include the politics of digital and artificial intelligence governance, media and journalism, political Islam, human rights, and civil society activism. And his scholarly articles and op-eds have been published in multiple journals. So thank you so much, Ari, for your contribution and also for now fielding the questions that come.
Great. Thank you, Helen, for your kind words. All right. I think we have had like 3 questions already, but before answering the questions from the audience, I have basically one critical questions that I'm hoping that the panelists can answer according to their expertise. So I think in the last like few months, like I've been hearing questions from journalists about whether Prabowo can actually survive his first term in office, or whether he will secure a re-election in 2029. As you know that Mas Eri has said that Saiful Mujani Bangipong has already floated the idea of impeaching Prabowo to save Indonesia's democracy. So I have questions for each panelist for this question on whether or not Prabowo can survive his first term. For Riandy, based on your excellent presentation about what you call unconventional and also unrealistic economic policies, that other critics will probably say, rather than unconventional, they would probably describe those policies as reckless and will have really dire consequences. Is Indonesia at risk of heading into a deep recession? The finance minister Prubaya himself has said that we are now Indonesia is now in a survival mode, and I think that's quite ominous for a finance minister to say something like that. I mean, like, are we heading a deep economic recession, given the what you call the unrealistic and unconventional economic policies by the Prabowo government? So that's for Riandy. For Umar and Syarif, I think that you share the same argument about Prabowo being basically insulated from the real world by his advisors or by his clique, and then Prabowo has this, Prabowo dislike the bureaucrats, and my question is this. Does Prabowo leadership styles somehow undermine his ability to manage conflicts among the elite? Because as we know that Prabowo's Jago economy, for example, through the Nantara, through Patriot Bond, Prabowo has this fragile relations with the elite, who, especially the big Chinese capitalists, who are facing intimidation, allegedly facing intimidation as part of the state strategy to mobilize domestic capital. And I think for Prabowo's foreign policy, for example, there have been, I think a few days ago, I saw a video by Habib Rizik, who is also concerned about Indonesia's involvement Indonesia's participation in the BOP, and how Indonesia is now more supportive of the US than, for example, the Iran or Gaza or the Palestine or the well, basically or the Palestinians. So the question is, can Prabowo maintain enough elite support, basically, to stay in power? If Prabowo can't do that, I think that we have reasons to believe that his rival elites will probably mobilize to challenge his leadership or his presidency. For Maidina and Mas Eri, I think do you think that the question now is that like, do you think that Indonesian civil society will have the capacity to mobilize against Prabowo, for example, or do they even have that plan to basically, impeach or oust Prabowo as suggested by Saiful Mujani? And if that's the case, will the new KUHP or will the new laws, will the new bills proposed by Prabowo enable him to contain those challenges from the social civil society organizations? So those are my questions that I hope that the panelists can enlighten us with. I hope that clears enough.
Who should go first, Mas Ari?
We can go with Riandy first.
So my unresponsible take of whether Prabowo can sustain the presidency at least from the political economy perspective, I believe because of the populist policy that he devised, I believe he will sustain until 2029, and probably he will secure also the second presidency if everything goes all right, because I think the game in the next years is how to relax the fiscal rule. That's the only game that he wants to play around with, because it's basically unrealistic to expect that the tax revenue can pick up that much. So as you would imagine, how would we expect the tax ratio increase from 9 to 10 in 1 year? Never been happening from 2000, early 2000 until now. The tax ratio always declining in general trend. The high growth only happening during a commodity boom. So tax revenue will not gonna pick up anytime soon, because that's also not because Minister Purbaya doesn't work as hard, but because our structure of the economy is mostly informal sector that are non-taxable basically. So unless we see a drastic structural transformation, which are not going to happen overnight, then tax revenue will be quite stagnated. And if the growth is, economy growing more than tax, you will expect tax revenue collection per GDP will drop. So that's what happened in the revenue side. And you're right about that we are running out of money. And that's the part where I really appreciate government's honesty. And that's the narrative has changed dramatically since the Iran crisis. That statement is not going to happen without the crisis. Last year, even in January, the government is still proud in admitting that in saying that we have all the money. It's realistic. APBN we are going to be very rich and all that stuff. But then when the Middle East crisis hits, people start to think. So the external pressure again and again have made the government start to really govern more effectively in terms of the budget realization. So I think that's the honest realization that we need to appreciate from the government side, that I really believe that we really run out of money, because until March the realization of government spending is already 21%, but the revenue is only 18%. The deficit is close to 1%, and that's only for 3 months. We still have 9 more months. And usually the early 3 months, the first 3 months is the period where basically government spending is a bit cool off. The spending acceleration will happen at the end of the period. So I don't really see how they will stay within the limit of 3%. So there are two choices: whether they need to rein in MBG, which is hard to do, or they need to relax the fiscal rule. I think there is huge possibility they will relax the rule because of the crisis in the Middle East. They can use Middle East crisis as an excuse to relax the 3%. So we run out of money. Yes, that's true. And depreciation. I think for depreciation, I think the government tendency is always to blame global crisis. But since 2022, the currency of ASEAN countries has quite a bit moved similarly, except when Prabowo presidency started. That's the period where Indonesia's currency, rupiah, started to diverge from the other currency. So that give you also a little bit of evidence that market are not confident with the direction of Prabowo's economic policy. But then depreciation also boosts our export. So there are two sides of the coin here. So depreciation makes our export cheaper, and because of the Middle East crisis, our commodity price also increases. But as I argue, the increases is not that much compared to the rise in subsidy spending. So we do definitely need to rein in some spending or relax the deficit if we are going to survive until the end of the year.
All right, so just to clarify, so according to you, Riandy, that the Prabowo government will basically return to the census, get back to the census, and then probably will implement the right policy because that's the only way to survive. That's pretty much your assessment.
That's true, but scaling back MBG is not easy. The kitchen is already being built, and even for the case of poisoning, because they suspend the kitchen that are causing some poisoning food, but
All
they
right,
still receive the incentive,
all
right?
right,
So they need to disburse the money. So it's not easy to scale back the MBG rollout. So I think the most realistic program is to reduce the MBG days from 6 to 4 probably or to 3, but that's also hard. But I think that's the middle ground, the compromise that the government may take. But I do believe that there is huge possibility that fiscal rule will be relaxed. Hopefully, we are not going to go to that direction because I don't see how they will really quickly can scale back the MBG. It's not easy. The kitchen is already there. You cannot just destroy all
yeah,
the kitchen or ask them to stop.
yeah.
It's 90% already being built. It's already there.
All right, thank you, Riandy. And let's move to Sharif and Umar. So what do you think?
Thank you
Yeah.
very much, Mas Arif, for the question. So I think my immediate take is I'm sure President Prabowo will survive at least until the next cycle of elections because the elite coalition is relatively stable at this moment because that's one of the key factors. But always, so there is a different perspective on how we understand Prabowo with Yudhoyono and also with Jokowi, where you kind of see a much more diverse and open presidency. This is a personalist president, but this is not the first time Indonesia has personalist president. Sukarno was a personalist president until the crisis come, until what happened in the army, the defections within the army, and also some faction within the Communist Party that creating chaos. Then he out of control. He thinking that, oh, Nadatul Ulama is on my side. Whatever happened, Nadatul Ulama, PKI, and also the army will support me. But during the crisis, it not happen. There is a defections within the president inner circle immediately, like he was shocked during that time. So I don't think Prabowo is facing the crisis as Sukarno has, but my biggest worry with this kind of with that kind of personalist leaderships is somehow the risk for defection is detected at the last minute. I mean, it's different from Jokowi. Jokowi knows you can defect earlier. He knows how to track people loyalty, disloyalty, or movement. That's one of the character of Jokowi that probably we are not yet seeing under President Prabowo. My argument is because of the constellations of advisors, because no president running a state by their own. It's always take advisors and type of advisors that kind of managing that situation. My biggest worry is we see a relatively unanimous advisor. Previously, we see Ibu Sri Mulyani, now we see Pak Purbaya, who has relatively similar characteristic with the president. So diversity of perspective is not happening. So that's my biggest worry currently. But overall, I trust I mean, that's on the president's side. I mean, people like senior politicians like Sumi Dasko Asmat, Bapak Safri Samsudin, and several other high-level political figures. They see dissents. They are much more on ground. If the crisis happen, they will definitely come to the president to kind of warning the president. So that's my argument actually. But yeah, I think I'm sure. I think the presidency will definitely survive for the next election.
So just one follow-up question. So you don't see that because from what I heard is that the rival elites actually, particularly whether it's Kala or is it the big capitalists, are really concerned about Prabowo's basically expansion. It's like state-led capitalism, and that will probably mobilize against Prabowo. Is that something that Prabowo will face, or the other elites will pretty much are basically too weak to mount a challenge against Prabowo?
That's a really good point, Mas Ari. But I think we should not confuse between noise and organized defections or criticisms toward the president. I mean, after what happened in August, this is my assumptions. I think the protest in August is like 212 for Jokowi. So 212 for Jokowi is changing his political spectrum by large. He is a different president after 212.
All right.
I think in some extent, Prabowo is also a different president after August protest.
All right.
So that's kind of highlight him into a new political reality. So
Yeah.
I think once again, there is also, of course, the criticism from Yusuf Kala and some
Okay.
other politicians. But I'm sure it's only noise rather than organized movement that managed by the other groups.
All right. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, Umar, I think
Yes. So with regard to the board of peace, I think Prabowo has managed to bring together the Islamic factions. He had a meeting between him, the foreign minister, and also the leaders of the Islamic organizations to discuss specifically about the board of peace. And I think to some extent he has been able to bring some calms for the Islamic organizations to support. So he's been able to bring the big organizations like NU or Muhammadiyah to support Indonesia's decision to join BOP. However, it doesn't mean that the Indonesia's Muslim society in general are supportive. So within NU, for example, we can see that there are factions like Gus Durian, for example, who has still voiced criticisms towards the BOP even after the meetings in the palace. Also in Muhammadiyah, there are people like Professor Busro Muqaddas, who has a significant influence among Muhammadiyah members, especially in Yogyakarta, and also the public policy department within Muhammadiyah, who still voice some criticisms towards the BOP and Prabowo's foreign policy. So this is something that that Prabowo has not been able to calm because the internal dynamics within the Islamic organizations are still happening. And then, as you mentioned, there are people like Habib Rizik who came with and who has seen these opportunities to criticize the regime, and he still had some considerable influence to the Muslim communities in Jakarta, even though he's not disruptive to the government's policy. He's actually Prabowo's allies. So I don't think Prabowo's legitimacy will be eroded by people like Habib Rizik. So in general, I think Prabowo has been able to manage the elite tensions. But I saw from his presidency right now, especially after the August protest last year, and also the current dynamics, he's increasingly being insecure. So he's increasingly distrusting
Right.
the politicians and the elites. His distrust clearly has a distrust to diplomats.
Right.
Uh, he preferred to personally engage in foreign policy and diplomacy, sidelining the senior diplomats. Even with the latest overflight access negotiations, there are
Right.
some criticisms within the foreign ministry towards the
Okay,
Ministry of
Mas
Defense,
Umar.
and the criticism has
Right.
been voiced a bit publicly. I think here there are some risk that president is not able to fully accomplish what he intend to do, what he intend to achieve.
Right.
But I think so far he's been able to manage the elite
Yeah.
relationships,
All
especially
right.
with the big Muslim organizations, and then the key
Okay, Mas Umar, sorry, I need to cut you off
figures.
there. All right, thank you so
Yeah.
much. Yeah. And we only have like about 8 minutes. I will kind of pick or combine some of the questions from the audience. This is now for Mas Eri and Maidina. I think we have one questions for Maidina from Rafika. Rafika questions are about the political consolidation among security actors. So, from your observation, when did consolidation between actors start in the form of provocative public cases in the post-authoritarian context? And when you say that prosecutors are seeking to regain their position within the criminal justice system, do you imply they have purposely lost that position after Jokowi was no longer the president? And for Mas Eri, I think I can pick one question from the first anonymous attendee. So, given Prabowo's tendency to interpret dissent as opposition to national progress rather than constructive feedback, and his documented pattern of dismissing critics as unapatriotic or foreign influence, what mechanism or strategies might effectively address this authoritarian tendency to mitigate potential policy failures that could harm Indonesia's democratic institution and development? All right, let's start with Maidina and then Mas Eri. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Masari, for moderating the Q&A, the really good Q&A session. It's really interesting to discuss this. And thank you, Mbak Rafika, for the question. So I want to highlight as well regarding the previous question on the civil society organization capability. Right now, after the mass criminalization, arrest, and detention to political prisoners in Indonesia, actually right now the civil society organization facing the problem about the lack of the capability to maintain all the problems that we are facing right now with the mass criminalization, the upcoming bill in the discussion in the parliament, and then we actually facing the problem on how we can manage this. So Mas Eri gives this example for the case of the Taut, but in terms of the consolidation of civil society organization, like since August 2000 and last year, we already have been in the discussion to bring the alternative of if there's any possibility that we can do the impeachment of the Prabowo, what kind of the new state, what kind of the new nation that we will discuss in the future. We will demand for the government, but still, yeah. But the problem is still the same. We are fragmented, like Mas Eri mentioned earlier, and we are still facing the problem about the support, the scheme of the donor funding right now is also problematic. It's also being scrutinized, and yeah, we're struggling with these things, and we're struggling actually with the mapping the strategic demand for the government itself, like whether or not we can do the changes in the constitution or just the law related to the security sector. So yeah, the problem because of the idea of impeachment still rely on the elites consolidation, and like I want to highlight as well from Pak Syarif earlier that the elite power it's still consolidated when it's come to the impeachment. We are actually not optimistic that the civil society organization can bring the movement substantially to demand for the impeachment. Yeah,
All right.
yeah. And
All
also
right. Thank you,
related to the second question
Yep.
about the role of the Attorney General Office. So basically, in the new Criminal Procedure Code, there are many new authority given to the Attorney General Office, and they focus more on the extraordinary crime, more on the organized crime, which is higher level than ordinary crime. So I think we see from our observation there will be distribution of power between the police and the Attorney Attorney General Office. The police will focus on the ordinary crimes, and the victim will be the ordinary crime, the human rights defender, and then in the Attorney General Office they will focus on the corruption, and they use the politicization. And because previously the different situation with the Attorney General Office right now, they are so close with the military. They're supported by the military, as we can see in the policy on the security of the Attorney General Office. They do engagement with the military. So I think we see that there are also legislation proposed by Attorney General Office maintaining their more power, and they know that right now the opportunity is on the military. They try to get more closer with the military, and they proposing the bill like asset privateer, and also maintaining how they can implement the new authority given by the new criminal procedure code, that they can do the out of court settlement, they can do the different prosecutor agreements without the clear mechanism of the accountability, and the one that have the authorities right now to the Attorney General Office.
All right. Thank you, Maidina. Yes, Mas Eri, at least for the first questions about the mechanism to mitigate authoritarian tendency. That's a really
Okay, thank
critical
you.
question. Yeah.
Okay, first, I agree with Maidina about the capacity of civil society that still suffer from depoliticization and demobilization from the New Order regime, that it's not yet has a political capacity to like follow up for the ideas of impeaching the president currently, because I mentioned also that the resilience of the civil society also remains fragile, tends to be just defensive and largely survival oriented. So we need to see what the discussion from Professor Saiful Mujani about the impeachment is more like try to push the boundaries to discuss within the limit of legality, something like desacralization of the presidency, that it can be impeached, and it has a base under our constitution. But with all due respect, Professor Saiful Mujani is not yet at the like Amin Rais or Gus Dur or Megawati in the 90s. He doesn't not yet has a political support to follow up that idea. So it's more like just like a discussion. It need to be appreciated that it's from intellectual to push the boundaries and try to discuss within the limit of legality of impeachment. As for the strategy, I think what the civil society need to do is to build broader alliances and to develop a more coordinated long-term strategy of resistance. So that's, I think, the strategy. Thank you.
Yeah, just one follow-up question. Just one, just make it quick. Okay, I'm going to get a quick answer. So I think that Saiful Mujani has been reported to the police for treason. I think treason charges. And I think Mas Ferry Amsari is also our contributor, also being reported to police for critiquing or criticizing the government. So is this new trend of like reporting any critiques to the government, to the police, will also basically silence or like weaken civil society movements against Prabowo, for example? Yeah. Mas Erick?
Yeah, it's how Prabowo and their supporters try to prioritize the political stability. So it's the law increasingly be used as a tool to manage and discipline dissent. So it will be more and more cases like this, I think.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the panelists or for Riandy, Syarif, Umar, Maidina, and Eri for your insightful for your insights about Indonesia. And my apologies for the questions that have not been addressed because I don't have much time. So I'm giving this back to Helen as chair. Thank you, Helen.
Okay, thank you very much, Ari. And I'd like to propose things, but before I do that, I'd just like to remind you, as Tim said at the beginning, that this seminar has been under Chatham House rules, so please don't quote any of the speakers without their permission. So that is an important thing so that everybody can feel open to speak. So now I'd like to thank, well, firstly, all the speakers, and just to mention that many of them have inconvenienced themselves by getting up at very odd hours to present. So we're particularly grateful. Pak Umar has come from Wales. Pak Riandy is in the Netherlands. Ibu Mai is in Indonesia, in Jakarta. Pak Syarif is in the US. And Pak Eri has not come very far, but still deserves thanks here at the University of Melbourne. As you can see, Pak Eri, Tim and I are all enjoying ourselves out in the gardens on campus while we do this talk. I'd also like to thank the chairs, Pak Tim and Pak Nadir, for managing everything very well. And particular thanks, as I mentioned before, to Pak Ari for all the work that he has put in organising what has been an absolutely wonderful seminar and very informative and very different topics so that we could get a good overview. And behind the scenes, sitting behind that University of Melbourne emblem, is Catherine, who has managed everything. We could not have managed to have the seminar without Catherine organising all the tech support. So thank you very much, Catherine, for all the work that you've done. Just much appreciated. And then finally, to all of our unseen audience scattered over the world, thank you very much for attending. And with that, I'll call the seminar closed unless Tim has a final word. No, so thank you very much for coming to everybody.